All right, welcome back, and we are live. And I'd say this is probably our first episode of the 2022 season. Now that we've kind of officially flipped over from the off season, looking towards training camp, towards the regular season. And we're really excited to be back for another season here at Russell Street Replay. I'm your host Nikhil Mehta. With me, as always, is Ronald Toothe. Ron, great to have you.
Oh, it's great to be here. I was doing okay leading up to this, but then today I went to my local ShopRite and they have pumpkin flavored coffee creamer in way too early. And I'm one of those psychos that does that sort of thing. So I'm on cloud nine right now.
Excellent. And we're really, really excited to have Chris Schisler here on the podcast. Chris and I actually met this off season. We didn't even really know each other last season. And we're really excited to have him over at Russ Street Report, pumping out a lot of good articles over there. Chris, thanks so much for coming on.
I couldn't be more pumped up. Let's talk some football, and it's almost here. It's real now.
Yeah, I know it's we're at that point where we're actually able to start talking ball and get an idea of how this team is going to shape up. Today's show, we're just going to touch quickly on like kind of the recent Ravens news, just kind of quickly recap the offseason like we always like to, and then launch forward, look at the NFL a little bit wider lens today, some stories to watch around the league, and ending with a little trivia segment from our good buddy Chris. He's going to quiz us at the end of this live stream here. So, the big news really, that we've seen since the last time we were on. The first thing, obviously, is the tragic passing of Jalen Ferguson and Tony Siragusa. I don't think we really had an episode after their passings. I'll be honest, that kind of took me out of it for a minute there, just like, didn't really want to think about schematics. And, it took maybe a day for people to be like, oh, Jalen Ferguson passed away, we need another edge rusher. And I was like, I don't think that's really where anyone's mind is right now. And, a lot has been said, so I don't really want to beat it to death or, make that be the centerpiece of this podcast. But I think it really did tell us two things. One, the Ravens really focus on character in their players. And they really focus on players that care. Syracuse is a great example of that. Ferguson, the biggest thing, the tributes for him were about his kids, about him being a father. And I think that speaks a lot about him. And, the other thing was how this fan base kind of rallied together and rallied around each other in what was really just a tough time. People, even within the Ravens organization, didn't know what to do. You just get hit with this news and you have to do something as the organization, but at the same time, as a person, you're having so much trouble. So, I don't know what kind of words you guys have. I know you guys have very special connections to those players as well.
Yeah, really just the suddenness of it was really how it was also crazy. Like neither of them were sick, obviously. Jalen Ferguson, for all intents and purposes, all we heard coming out of minicamp is that he was in the best shape of his life. Tony Siragusa, you heard Shannon Sharp say what? Last month they were together laughing and filming the 30 for 30 on the 2000 Ravens, which is going to hit a lot harder now. I shared on Twitter my personal story of Goose and how from a young age, when I was a kid playing youth football and that first day I ran out there and I had a Ray Lewis jersey on, but my coach, he says, "You're not Ray, you're the Goose." And I was 8 at the time, so I had no clue, but that was always kind of like my connection to Goose. And I always followed him, not just as a player, but even his career at Fox afterwards. And, it was a shocker. And then in Jalen's too, like I said, he was in the best shape of his life and for things to happen the way they did and so suddenly. And it is one thing that I have seen for the most part, and that is good. It's that he hasn't really been judged based on the circumstances of his death. And obviously it's out there, so we're not speaking out of turn about it. But the way that he should be remembered is as the father he was and as the man he was. And every single story we've seen about him since then has been nothing but a testament to how great he was in both of those regards. So it just really stunning and really heartbreaking.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself, Ron. Chris, I know, you have a very special connection to Goose, if you want to go ahead and share that.
Yeah. Well, I named my dog after Tony Siragusa. My dog is named Goose. Tony Siragusa was the first player not named Ray Lewis that really grabbed my attention. And I played defensive line when I was in high school, and I really kind of think Tony Siragusa was one of the guys who kind of shaped my personality as a kid. Ray Lewis, Tony Siragusa, Shannon Sharp, but Tony
He
Siragusa
made it cool to be the big kid.
Yeah, he did. And Tony Siragusa was the biggest personality on a team that had Shannon Sharp and Ray Lewis. enough said. He was larger than life. He was unbelievable. And you know what? The thing that kills me is he's not like a Hall of Fame player. So outside of Baltimore and maybe even Indianapolis, where he had a long career, I don't think it hits that hard for the average NFL fan. And that's really sad because he is a great example of a guy who did the dirty work to make Ray Lewis fantastic. And him and Sam Adams are the best combination of all time in a 4-3 defensive line. You can't beat it. I mean, Warren Sapp and Simeon Rice have a conversation there, but give it to the guys who won the Super Bowl first, the Ravens, not the Bucks. We showed defense could win championships. And I just want to say about Jalen Ferguson, I was so shocked when it happened that it didn't really hit until the news of Saragusa. So I just felt both of them at the same time, and it was very hard to process. So, it's tragic. And he was a great father, great guy. All accounts, he was just this great personality. And Sack Daddy, man. Show respect for the guy who broke Terrell Suggs' college record. Just to think if that came into fruition in the NFL, and it looked like all accounts he was on his way. So horribly, horribly tragic, but his kids are going to live on. His family is going to live on in his honor. And you know what? They're going to do great things. They're so young and so full of potential. So it's tragic, but the love that this community felt, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, and there's going to be obviously tributes, and I would hope some kind of helmet patch or something like that to commemorate them, and remind us that it's not. We're always doing this for Baltimore, but there's a little more this year. There's a little more in it. You're doing it for Goose, you're doing it for Ferg, and I think that's something that'll be part of this season. To kind of move away from the tragic side of this offseason a little bit, we can move back towards the Ravens and their current roster construction, re-signing Justin Houston, which felt like kind of a formality. Felt like it was going to happen anyway. After we placed the unrestricted free agent tag on him, I don't think other teams really valued his contributions the way we did. He played really, really well last year. I think he was a fantastic run defender. He was getting a lot of pressures. He just was a step away from several more sacks. And I think that hopefully we'll see those numbers come up a little bit more this year. And obviously his mentorship of Odafe Owe was a big storyline last season as well. You're hoping that he brings that into this season as well with, Dalen Hayes looking to have a full year. We've got Ojabo. Of course, he's going to have to come off his Achilles injury. But I think one thing it does is it just gives you a solid starter on the, that 3-4 outside linebacker role, that edge rusher role, a guy that you can say, okay, he can't play every snap. He's not going to play every snap, but when you need him, especially on third downs, when the other team's driving, obvious passing situations, Houston's a guy you can bring in and just consistently put out there on the edge with Owe lined up on the other side. And I think that, I still think another edge is needed. I just don't know necessarily who that is. It feels like Jason Pierre-Paul is kind of the only option. Are there any other names out there you want to explore?
For me personally, not that come to the top of mind, but it's funny that you mentioned JPP because I was going to say, it did feel like a formality that he would be back until, there had been really no rumblings. And then we hear that Pierre-Paul is coming in for a visit. It ended up not really accumulating to anything. And here we are with Houston back. But I don't think that really closes the door on JPP maybe coming in or either, especially to your point about Ojabo. Who knows when he's going to be back. Pierre-Paul is going to be a cheap option. Obviously, he really enjoyed his stay in Baltimore, even though it was short, kind of a brief little visit. But, Houston is fine. I mean, it would be very easy to just look at his stats from last year, and I'm sure most casuals would, and just say, oh, he's old, he sucks. He only had, 6.5 sacks, whatever. But if you really watch the game, to your point, he was very stellar in the run game. It was more of a leadership kind of impact that he had on the team as opposed to just a production standpoint. So, yeah, I mean, it's okay. It doesn't really completely move the needle for me, but it's good to have more depth. I mean, they just brought back Brent Urban. So if they can't do it with studs at the top at this point right away until Ojabo comes back and we see what Owe forms into, let's just get as many bodies in there that can rush the passer as possible.
Yeah, I think Justin Houston is a good player, but it's kind of keeping it copacetic. It's where we were last offseason, minus a little bit, obviously, because Jalen Ferguson. But, Jason Pierre-Paul wouldn't be a bad signing. I could take it or leave it, honestly, because you don't really know what you're going to get from him. I think you need to double down on interior pressure. I'd love to see Ndamukong Suh come in. He had 6 sacks 2 years in a row. Play him in a limited snap count, pass rush situations. Tell me it's 3rd and long, Joe Burrow's dropping back, and he's got Travis Jones, Odafe off the edge, and then, Ndamukong Suh up the gut. I think that could really be the way to go. I think you're going to need to make the defensive line matter more, whether the edge rushers do their thing or not.
Yeah, I think Suh is like kind of that counterpoint to everyone saying you need more help on the edge. And you think, well, by the time we come back mid-season, we're going to have 4 guys who we're going to want to be rushing off the edge with some consistency in Owe, Ojabo, Bowser, and Houston. And, as much as I want to see Justin Matabuke take those next steps and, as much as I'd like to see him, the fact is interior pass rush on these passing downs, you're counting on one of Michael Pierce or Travis Jones to be able to be that guy, which, for Pierce, that is not necessarily a guarantee just given his size. For Jones, he's a rookie. Campbell's a little bit older, and all of a sudden you feel like the interior pass rush isn't as depth as it should be, or have as much depth as it should. And yeah, I think Suh or Pierre-Paul they should bring in for a cheap deal just to have another veteran guy up front. Suh is the kind of guy who occasionally gets to the quarterback really quickly, just quick bull rushes.
Yeah, and that just when Chris said Suh, I wanted to cut in because going back way earlier in the offseason, I was a proponent of signing Suh over bringing back Campbell. I know Suh doesn't play an enormous amount of snaps either, but compared to what Campbell's probably going to play this year, I think Suh would have been a much better investment than bringing back Campbell. All things considered and all respect to Calais Campbell I think Suh right now is way more of an impact player still.
Well, see, and I think I'm a little split with you on that because I feel like Campbell is that dirty work guy that clears the double teams, that, tends to take out half the line and clear the path for Owe. Did that a couple times last year. And the other thing is, like, he's just such a technician down in the trenches in a way that I'm not quite sure Suh is. And again, I'm not as sharp on Suh's tape and stuff like that, but Campbell's ability to read, especially run plays, and yeah, it's a passing league, but, this Ravens defense has always thrived in its ability to stop the run and force opponents into obvious passing situations. And I think that Campbell plays a big role in that. I also think having his voice in the locker room as a leader, to me, is better than having Suh's, especially in a defense that, little loss of ballast in terms of leadership the past few seasons. There's not a very clear guy, and I feel like that's going to come down to Campbell a lot more this season.
I don't disagree that Campbell is a better leader. And I think it really boils down to what you value and what you want. If you want a quick penetration guy, it's Suh. If you want a good run defense guy and a guy who can really have length and get in the passing lanes with his hands up, that's Campbell. So there's value to both of them. I think when you have a relationship already established, you just take it. I mean, Cleveland could have learned that lesson, but hey. Any shot I can take at the Browns, I'm going to take.
I'm here for it.
But yeah, I like Campbell. I have no problem with it. I want to get him a ring. I want to get that guy a ring. He deserves it. He's a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah.
And he came here to win a ring. And Justin Houston came here to get a ring. And this might be the season they actually expected to get.
Yeah. Also, 2 things I randomly love about both those players. I don't know why, but I really like their voices, just like the way they talk, especially Campbell, the way he talks. I'm like, yeah, I would absolutely run into battle for that man.
Hey, come on, man.
Yeah. He's got that little rasp to it. So moving kind of back into our category format a little bit. Obviously, we're going to start recapping games once the preseason kicks off again. But to start recapping the offseason, I know we've talked about it a lot on a couple of pods, but what's our favorite collective, or I guess not collective, what's everyone's individual favorite move of the offseason? Signing, trade, draft pick, whatever.
Well, mine might be surprising given all of the awesome things that they have done between the draft and free agency, but my favorite was signing Kyle Fuller. I mean, to get a guy that cheap who has such a proven history, and yeah, he's had a bit of a lull these last 2 seasons. You can contribute it to maybe he was kind of out of position playing more, and the outside is like that true number one guy and putting too much responsibility on him. Whatever you want to say, they got him for a bargain. And with Peters coming off the injury, Humphrey probably a little safer coming off of his injury, given that it was a upper body injury, whereas Peters was the ACL, obviously. Bringing him in to be that kind of, I guess, rock, for lack of a better term, just that guy who ensures that it's not going to be like last year if those guys aren't fully up to snuff, and we're not going to be throwing Robert Jackson out there. You know, you have a guy that you can legitimately depend on as your number 3 corner with some awesome rookies behind him in Armour Davis and Pepe Williams. Like, it just Fuller, I think it's going to be one of those moves that in like week 13, week 14, we're going to be like, damn, I'm really glad they did that.
Chris?
I couldn't agree more with Fuller. I showed me that the Ravens weren't content. They weren't lazy. But I'm going to say Kyle Hamilton. Drafting Kyle Hamilton at 14, to me, like, you got a guy at a ridiculous value. You got a guy that has all the range in the world, and you did that after you signed Marcus Williams. Now all of a sudden that signing makes way more sense. I know the plan. See, when they drafted Kyle Hamilton, the plan was all there together. They want to have that secondary that gives freedom to those all-pro corners. They want to have that secondary because interceptions, pressure, sacks. You know, when you have coverage that the quarterback's got to get rid of the football. Well, you get coverage, sacks, interceptions, tipped passes, and you know what? Marlon Humphrey will punch out some fumbles too. Good to get him back. Look, I know the plan, and when they put Kyle Hamilton together, everything came together for me. I knew I wasn't all that excited about Marcus Williams. I wasn't unexcited. It was a good signing, but I wasn't like, wow, we won the offseason. But with him and Hamilton, the plan is here, and I'm here for it.
So, yeah, first of all, I think, Ron, your point about Kyle Fuller, so on, especially late in the season when he's making plays. And Kyle Hamilton falling to 14, we're still going to look back on it and be like, what the hell was the rest of the league thinking? What are you doing? But the biggest reason why I'm really excited about both of those things is my favorite offseason move. Firing Wink Martindale and replacing with Mike McDonald. That, I think, is
spicy.
The masterstroke of the offseason. I think that's the rug that really ties this whole room together. Because if you sign Marcus Williams and draft a Kyle Hamilton and you still had Wink Martindale, not super helpful because they're just going to be scrambling all over themselves in cover 1, cover 0 looks, right? Instead, we are about to see, I think, one of the most interesting defenses in the NFL this season, especially in the way that it's going to evolve over the course of the season. Because you have to think about the players that are going to come back. Bowser and Ojabo are the main ones, right? They're going to come back later in the season, and that's going to completely change what they're able to do, especially in terms of defending the pass. Bowser is a linebacker built to disrupt the pass, both in coverage and rushing off the edge. And I think McDonald's ability to find creative ways to get the team to that midway point when those guys are fully back, and then what he's going to do after that, incorporating them into the defense, is just going to be really exciting. And that's why I think, McDonald's is a guy that we're already talking about as maybe he's a head coach kind of guy. He has that feel about him. He has that confidence in the locker room. And I just think we're going to look back and say, man, the defense he put together, DaCosta did a great job building the right roster for him, but the communication, the way the defense plays, I think it's going to be really something.
Yeah, so I
agree. I mean,
I didn't mean to cut you off, Ron.
Didn't
mean to cut you off, Ron.
No, you're good. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, Chris. So I got excited, man, when Nikhil was talking about this because this makes so much sense. It makes so much sense with the defense. You're seeing a lot of Michigan guys come into the process. He drafted Ojabo. You got their inside linebacker as an undrafted free agent. And I feel like they know exactly what they want to do, and they're getting their guys in there. And here's the thing. Isn't it fun to be excited about Ravens defense When's the last time we were excited about Ravens defense? And this is coming from a Ravens guy. Like Ravens defense.
ACL.
Dude, guys. Oh man, we haven't been raving about Ravens defense for a while. And that's unacceptable in Baltimore. That's Baltimore's bread, butter, Old Bay, everything in the pot.
Yeah, man. Really, it's funny because the best way to kind of get an idea of what McDonald's going to bring to this defense is look at the way he used Daxton Hill at Michigan. And we have 3 Daxton Hills that we could throw around: Kyle Hamilton, Chuck Clark, and Marcus Williams. All 3 of those guys are going to be chess pieces that are going to be moving all over the place. They're going to be in the box. They're going to be playing some of that middle kind of rover, essentially a de facto middle linebacker role. They're going to be high in the secondary. There's going to be so many things that McDonald is going to do. And to your point, Nikhil, he does have kind of that young coach shine on him that we've seen guys like Shanahan and Sean McVay have and come through, and Matt LaFleur. Who knows? He could easily be one of those guys. And to your point, Chris, I think Baltimore defense is back in Baltimore for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like we're actually looking forward a little bit more to the defense this year, me personally, than I am the offense. And it's the first time I think I've ever said that since we drafted Lamar. And that kind of moves me into my least favorite move of the offseason. And I have to be honest, this is tough because I was like just such a huge fan of their entire offseason. I think the thing that still gets me a little bit is not taking a flyer on a receiver. And I know we still might, but I think that when you think about how much chemistry is important and seems to be important for Lamar, particularly with his receivers, you would want to have an idea of what veteran you're going to sign, and you would want to start thinking about doing it earlier because you want to get him those reps in. You want to get them integrated in the offense, because what I wouldn't want to see happen is have something like, Sammy Watkins, where, he does pretty well the first 4 or 5 weeks and then pretty much falls off the map in the second half of the season. And I think that that's when the offense will get into trouble, is if we have that kind of situation where we sign a receiver, he's good for the first few games and then falls off the map. I think that's when our offense kind of contracts. And the big thing about the offense is that it needs to expand as the season goes on. And it's tough because I don't know, who that receiver would be. Obviously, we all know the options that we've tossed around. But I think that as much confidence as I have in our guys, in Proche and Wallace and Duvernay and obviously Bateman, I think there is a question of, is there leadership in that room? Are we leaving it just to the wide receiver coaches? What could a guy like Julio come in and kind of give to that group with, a 40% snap count or something like that? I think those are questions we're going to have into the season, because I just doesn't feel like the receiver signing is going to happen. But I still feel like that is the move that I wish we, what it is? I wish we replaced some aspect of Hollywood Brown's deep threat. I think that's the thing we're all going to miss the most about Hollywood Brown. He is a great deep threat. There's no doubt about it. And I just don't think we have that very clear deep threat. I know Jonas Schaffer of the Baltimore Sun wrote a little while ago about Bateman potentially being that guy, but Bateman can't be that guy and the do-it-all receiver. I want a guy who's just going to release downfield, and Lamar's deep ball has gotten better. And so maybe that's Duvernay, but as of right now, I don't really see who that's going to be.
No, me either. And to your point, even if they do bring in another wide receiver at this point, be it a Julio, a T.Y. Hilton, which would be very on brand, there's no chance those guys are going to come in and be leaders at this point, I'd imagine, right? These guys have been working together all off season, Bateman, Proche, Wallace. Like, they're such a tight-knit group now that even if a guy comes in that they respect, like a Julio, they're not just going to come in and say, all right, you're the leader of our group now. It's like, no, they've all got this massive chip on their shoulder, it seems, even going back to minicamp when Bateman came up for his press conference, who was right there next to him, James Proche. Like, it seems like they've almost kind of got this us against the world mindset, which is the only reason that I didn't pick that for my choice for least favorite. I really think that with enough snaps for all these guys have a chance to be serviceable enough. Do I think any of them are going to come out and be 1,200, 1,300 yard guys? Probably not, with the exception of maybe Bateman. He's the only one that I would peg for that. But Tylan Wallace can serve a purpose. James Prochet can serve a purpose. Devin Duvernay can certainly serve a purpose. As long as they serve their purpose and they're not just ghosts out there running into each other like we saw on many occasions last year, I think that the receiver group will be improved even despite the loss of Bateman.
I'm not negative on the wide receivers, and I'm kind of the contrarian here with Ravens flock in general. I even wrote an article about this. My whole point, though, is that Devin Duvernay has all of the traits, and they're a little different, but all the traits of Marquise Brown. There's no reason he can't replace his route tree, and he never really ran down the field. In this offense, really only one receiver runs down the field, and that's a conversation to take up with Mr. Roman. But Duvernay's got the traits, and he has good hands, and he's a bit of a bigger target down the field. Not much bigger, but he's a little bigger than everyone's bigger than Hollywood. But James Prochet is a good route runner. Tylan Wallace was a guy who made yards after the catch look like the routine at Oklahoma State. I like what Ron said. They all serve a purpose. But again, I keep going back to the idea that you only need two guys. You need Rashad Bateman, and you need Devin Duvernay or James Prochet, whoever it ends up being. But I think that Duvernay ends up replacing Marquise Brown's route tree. The preference for the passing game goes Andrews, Bateman, Duvernay, in my opinion. That's what I think is going to happen. And remember, Nick Boyle didn't go anywhere. Isaiah Likely and Kohler are there. It's a tight end, running back. Project Pat's going to get a lot of snaps. Look, I think if the running game is fine and you go back to averaging 5.5 yards per carry and you avoid third down a lot of the time, all of a sudden this conversation a little less important. When the offensive line in 2019 was good, nobody cared that Seth Roberts was one of our best receivers. Okay? You can win with Lamar Jackson be the big difference maker. So I actually love the fact that we didn't waste money on a guy who's not going to make a difference in Greg Roman's offense in the first place. That's just salary cap prioritization. But look, it's going to work. It's going to work. Now, is it going to work as good as we want? No. But I don't think it needs to be great. I think the tight ends and Lamar, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think one of the things is like one of the things that we've talked about a couple times between our group chat, this pod, is kind of the feeling going back to 2019. But the more I think about it, the more I think the offense is actually going to take a little bit of a step forward from what 2019 was. That offense still liked to air it out as much as it did run the ball. And I just think we're going to see like a very balanced offense. I think there is going to be plenty of passing. I still think there's going to be an emphasis on Lamar passing the ball and working out of the pocket. But last year it was kind of an overemphasis on that because of the running backs going down and how the season went, getting behind in a lot of games. I think this year
not having an offensive line.
That too. And then we're going to build up. I think just this year, we're going to build up leads a little bit more than we did last year. But I think that we are going to pass with the lead more often than we did in 2019. In 2019, we had tendency to just kind of run out games. But I think this year we're going to press advantage and pass a little bit more with our lead instead of just kind of running out the clock. As effective as that was. I mean, the Bucs game that year, I think I bet my uncle like $10 that, if the Ravens got the ball inside of 6 minutes, the Bucs wouldn't get it back. And I was right. And it was great.
Right. Yeah. But that last drive was crazy.
Like it was shout out Ritish Mama. But I think we're going to be a little bit more aggressive in pressing our advantage when we do have the ball and the lead this year. And so I am looking forward to that. Ron, did I get your least favorite move or did I miss it?
No, you didn't. And it's probably not going to be the most popular choice. But I'm going to go with taking a punter in the 4th round. I know everybody.
Get out of Baltimore. Get out of Baltimore.
I know. I'm not in Baltimore, but I love Jordan Stout. He's the man for all intents and purposes. Everything we've seen of him, I love the guy. And if he could, hey, maybe he comes in and he's the best punter of all time and he makes me eat my words. But, we talk about that wide receiver hole and we talk about these other spots that maybe you could use one more guy there, whether it's edge, whether it's middle linebacker. I just think the draft capital could have been much better spent on a position of need more than a punter. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of hoping that we're not doing much punting this year personally. And I think you could have drafted somebody who could have ensured that more than taking a punter that high.
So question for you then, because I will say if we had waited on Stout, we wouldn't have gotten him. We know that for pretty much certain now if we'd waited to take him past the pick. If his career is basically Sam Cook's, are you like, how do you feel? Is that like, and there's no wrong answer to this. I'm legitimately just curious because
yeah,
I think saying like, if his career is Sam Cook and he's a, world-class punter, great. But how does that move the needle for us in any one given season? Right.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to say. I guess it depends what happens around him. Like, obviously the difference of whether the Ravens are a 13-4 team or a 7-10 team isn't whether or not they drafted a punter in the 4th round. But I guess it would be kind of tough to say, what exactly a point that I would look at in the future and say like, oh, that's it. We miffed on that pick because ultimately I don't think we did. I think he's going to be a great punter. I just personally, I don't feel like drafting a punter in the 4th round is a Super Bowl this year kind of move, despite every other move that they did make is absolutely an indication of that. Every other draft pick they made, every other signing they made tells me that they're trying to win a Super Bowl right now. The punter one just kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. And I guess it's not even so much that I didn't like the move as much as it's just my least favorite of the moves that they did make.
That's fair. Well, and kind of moving into kind of a similar category, missed opportunities. And, this one I want to expand. I know I talked about not signing wide receivers, kind of a missed opportunity. So I guess I cheated a little bit there. But, I think to me, missed opportunities is not figuring out the pass rush earlier. Not having – we don't know the details with the Derek Wolfe, everything that happened with Derek Wolfe. But obviously, the Brent Urban signing was kind of a preemptive response to what ended up happening with Wolfe, parting ways with him. But I just think you look at the pass rush and you're just not that confident about it to start the year. I mean, I love OA, obviously. I think Dalen Hayes could be good. We talked about Houston, but one injury, and that group is crazy thin again. And I think that, at a certain point, you do have to, I love the zig when zag. I love going after tight ends instead of wide receivers, looking for those market inefficiencies. But I do think at a certain point, you got to pay up for an edge rusher. You got to pay up for a guy that's just going to go up against the best offensive tackles in the league and get to the quarterback. And I think that, you look back and you look at drafting Kyle Hamilton, you're like, man, that Marcus Williams money may have gone elsewhere, as much as I love that deal. But you also just think about a lot of the mid-tier signings that they did. And as much as I love Ricard, you've got Pierce. Fuller was a good deal, so I don't think I would take that one back. But then you've got Urban. And there are probably a couple others I'm missing right now that you think, okay, we piece that money together. You put together a restructure for Marlon and Kevin Zeitler. That opens up another, I think, $9 or $10 million. Mm-hmm. You're in business for a first year cap hit on a slightly longer deal for a Von Miller or a Chandler Jones, and you take that big champion.
Za'Darius.
Yeah, and even Za'Darius, you're like, hey, everything that happened with him, what went down. Clearly, there was some issue with his agent too. Fine, but I kind of wanted to be in on Chandler Jones and Von Miller, and at least sniff around there and see like, okay, what can we do to make this work with them? Because it's not like the Bills have a bunch of like super cheap contracts. They're paying Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs like crazy amount of money. And so we could have done that. And I think that is one thing that I'm looking ahead into future cap years as well. And looking at the lack of money that's committed 23 through 25-6 right now. And say you could have rolled the dice and taken a shot a little bit more this season, like you were saying, Ron, for that win the Super Bowl kind of move.
I couldn't agree more, Nikhil. The last time we had a dynamic duo at pass rusher, 2014, Elvis Dumervil and Terrell Suggs. That's not cool. This is a premium position, and we're acting like we can get them in the bargain bin. And yes, Matt Judon kind of worked out, and yes, Darius Smith kind of worked out, but that's kind of patchwork system at the outside linebacker position. Odafe Oweh was a real swing at the position, and I appreciate that. But you just don't have premier talent at a premium position. And to me, if I was the Ravens general manager, my first priority was the offensive line. After that, It had to be pass rush. Now they chose to fix the secondary, and I'm not complaining about it. I told you I love Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams. I think that's great. But my biggest fear right now as we get to the playoffs with a team that can win a Super Bowl, and we go up against Josh Allen, and he's just having one of those games where there's no defense to the perfect pass and no one's hitting him.
Yeah.
And I can't stand it. I can't stand the fact that in the AFC you have all the quarterbacks. And to me, you have to have a lethal weapon kind of mindset. You have to just be a mad rush to the quarterback. And I like what we've done defensively. But look, I love Ojabo, and I think long term it's going to be one of the best picks we ever made. So I don't hate the pick. And I like Linderbaum. But Jermaine Johnson was there, I believe. Gosh. Look, you got to prioritize pass rush. And until you prioritize pass rush, I mean, I love Linderbaum. But when we drafted Linderbaum, I was like, you're telling me you don't want to go first-round pass rush 2 years in a row when you have 2 first-round picks 2 years in a row?
Yeah, and I think you're hoping Ojabo and Owe can be that duo. And I think one other thing that we kind of forget, and I kind of hinted at earlier, I don't want Tyus Bowser to be an every down edge rusher. I know he's very good at that, and that's something that's in the toolbox, but he is such an instinctive player in coverage. He is the kind of guy that you use as another chess piece to sit in those traps in those underneath coverages, to take on complex, take on those complex assignments where he's got to keep his eyes on the quarterback and hold his own and, prevent the QB from dashing too. I mean, that's something Mahomes and Allen kill people with. And so, having depth and more rotational ability there just would have been great for me.
And Bowser is that inside linebacker polish that you kind of wish Patrick Queen had. And he's your best, most experienced edge rusher. Oh, come on. It's just, I want premium talent at a premium position.
It's like the Moneyball quote, 9 Scott Hatterbergs might be the best offense in baseball. I think 9 Tyus Bowsers might be the best defense, or 11 Tyus Bowsers might be the best defense in football.
Tyus Bowser is all bought in. He is a play like a Raymond player. I love Tyus Bowser. I actually love the players we have. I'm excited about this unit. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but in the playoffs, pass rush could be the thing that kills you.
So
it very well could be. Oh, yeah. No, I'll just say it very well could be, but I guess I've just almost kind of come around to it, just the fact that we have Ojabo now. And I firmly believe, and I'm sure you guys both do too, that him and Owe are going to be among the best 1-2 punches of pass rushers in football. I think we're just going to have to kind of grit our teeth through it in the beginning while we're waiting for him to come back and kind of dealing with the mishmash group of the Houstons and the, whoever's. And Bowser, by the way, looks great right now.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike McDaddy's really going to have to take the wheel to start the year, like I was saying before.
Wait. What did you just call him?
Mike McDaddy? You haven't heard that before?
No, but I'm here for it.
Oh, definitely.
All right. Well, moving on to my missed opportunity here. I didn't really think that they missed out on too much this offseason. And the move that I picked, for all we know, may have never been possible from the start. We think it was, and it was reported that it was, but ultimately what ended up happening is what we all expected to happen, and that's Bobby Wagner signing with the Rams and not the Ravens. I think he would. Oh man, any issues that we had in terms of pass coverage from the middle linebacker group, I think that all goes out the window with him. He provides that Ray Lewis-esque, not on par with Ray Lewis-esque kind of center stability in the middle of the group. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
In more ways than one. Yeah, from a productivity standpoint and from just a leadership standpoint. So it really seemed like it came down to us and the Rams. Was he using us for leverage? Probably. But ultimately, in terms of things that they missed out on this offseason, that's the only one that really kind of like gutted me. I guess besides Za'Darius, but when it started coming down to the agents and it got all dirty, it just kind of felt like, whatever. But the Wagner one really stung.
Yeah, what stings to me about Wagner and Smith more than not getting the players is, you can't overcommit your money. You can't, overcommit your money to a bunch of different players and then, whoever gets back to me first gets it. Well, you're not going to do very well in future off seasons if that's how you're going to operate, right? You have to be above board with players and their agents as much as you can. And so you can't put a deal on the table and just whip it away because someone else came along. And so, when you offer that contract, you get that agreement from Smith's agent, you earmark that money. You don't touch it because it's gone. You think you spent it and you don't go after other guys. And so I think that is one other thing that, there's really no way to avoid that with Smith. It seemed like that was just a lot of miscommunication. Wagner, that was a little bit later, so I understand it, but still, there were still other pursuits going on at the time that we could have been in play for. I'm not really again, kind of out what Chris was saying. I'm not really super upset with how everything worked out. I have my questions, but like I've said, I'm really confident in Mike Macdonald and his ability to form this defense and get it to the point where Bowser and Ojabo are back. Moving on, kind of to looking forward at the season, who's an under the radar player that you're most excited to see? Because I think, a lot has been said about Bateman. A lot has been said about Kyle Hamilton. Who's a player that, you don't think is getting enough love that you're excited to see?
Why don't you kick us off, Chris?
Brandon Stevens, defensive back, really fluid athlete. And I just can't, every time I watch him, I'm just taken away by the traits. He's so smooth. And I mean, he's like Michael Jackson moonwalking. It's just unbelievable how incredible he is as an athlete. And he reminds me a lot of a young Lord Darius Webb. And now you have all this talent in the secondary, and you can do whatever you want with him. You can do whatever you want with him. He's a young up-and-coming player. This is Brandon Stevens is the reason. You say, Tavon Young, you can go. Anthony Abert, you can go. Because you drafted a guy that, look, this guy is 1 year in, I'm convinced. I don't know what he's going to be, but he's going to be something.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. He's another guy you can throw into that list of guys that Mike Macdonald. Sorry, we're confused with somebody I'm about to talk about a little after. He'll kind of use him in that Dax Hill kind of chess piece sort of role, throw him all around. I'm sure he'll be playing a lot of corner this year just because of how much depth there is at safety, but he'll take reps at safety too. Who knows? Maybe he'll play in the middle if he can learn how to catch interceptions a little better. I'm sure his reps will go up. We won't hate on him for that, though, because to your point, Chris, that's a great comp. I love the Ladarius Webb. He is very smooth in that kind of Spider-Man-y sort of way. So that's a really good comp there, and I love it. I love Stevens.
Ron, who's your player flying under the radar right now?
So mine is, you'd expect to probably go with like a younger sort of sexier kind of pick here, but mine is going to be Mike Davis. I doubt that Dobbins and Edwards are going to be getting their usual, or at least their the amount of carries they'll get earlier in the year is not going to be what they get at the end of the year. They're going to try to ease him in. That's the whole reason that they signed Davis to begin with. And of course, just to avoid, God forbid, something like last year happens. You don't want this who's playing running back this week sort of thing going on. So I'm sure it was also to kind of provide some stability to the RB3 spot. But I mean, he's looked good the last few seasons in Chicago and Atlanta. Like, the guy's got quads for days. Obviously, he's jacked. He's still got some juice in the tank. And then an offense like the Ravens, he feels like one of those guys that was, one of those perfectly, like you couldn't script a guy who would fit the Ravens offense better. So I love it. I think he's going to be, especially earlier in the season, I think it's going to be hard to take reps away from him when Gus Edwards and Dobbins are back fully up to health.
Yeah, and I think that having the depth in the running back room this year is like so night and day from last year when you're like, all right, like there's plenty, like we don't have enough carries to go around. And yeah, Brandon Stevens is a guy who I was really high on all last year because when he was drafted, I was like, who the heck is that? And so I went and watched a lot of his tape and I was, saw the same thing. Really fluid athlete, very instinctive player, the kind of guy that you trust to execute complex assignments that I think we're going to see a little bit more of this year. My under the radar player is a guy who's been flying under the radar this entire podcast because we've been talking about the edge rush, and I think his name only came up once. It's Dalen Hayes. It's going to be the kind of situation where they're going to say, Dalen Hayes, we need you to go rush the passer. Just go get it done. Because early in the year, that's going to be one of the main guys that's going to be rotating in. I think that like obviously they signed Steven Means and Vince Beagle, and they like those guys just fine as vets to bring in. But if you think about, who we want to kind of take a big step in this absence of Bowser and Ojabo, it's Hayes. Can he bring some of that juice that we saw in the preseason last year, stunted by injuries all last season. But he looked good in the preseason. And yeah, it's the preseason, inferior quality opponents and all that stuff. But I think that, another year in, I think he's going to be really hungry. I mean, this is a guy that was talked a lot about as a captain and a leader at Notre Dame. And I think that kind of lost year to a certain extent is really going to have him hungry to make a mark early in this season, because he knows, kind of like the receivers do, this is a chance to step up. This is a chance to cement myself before the team makes any other moves, before these guys come back from injuries, kind of with Mike Davis, like you said. And so I think that, Hayes is a guy flying crazy under the radar right now, even like I said on this very podcast. And finally, for our categories today, favorite training camp Ravens storyline. Now, this can be, a position battle, a scheme related thing. Is it something really, we haven't actually talked about the offense a whole lot. Is there, a big part of the offense that you're looking forward to seeing in training camp? Ron, why don't you start us off?
We're saying specifically offense or just
no, just training camp in general.
Because I'm very interested, and I guess we'll say cautiously optimistic about the result of what's going to happen behind Patrick Queen at middle linebacker. We've got Malik Harrison coming back. We signed Diego Fagot. It really, besides those two guys, though, including those two guys, because, we have Harrison, who we don't even know what he's going to be at this point, and Fagot was an undrafted free agent. So to me, it's by far our most shallow position, and we're hoping that Patrick Queen takes a major step forward this year. I think he probably gets a little more hate than he deserves. I think he's more serviceable than people would give him credit for, but I also don't think he's a guy that you want to put the entire integrity of the middle linebacker group on. So I guess I'm just curious to see who's going to step up and be that second guy behind him.
Chris? Yeah, I hear that. And that's kind of mine. So I'm going to switch on to the offense here. I'm going to talk about the offensive tackle position. Look, this is a position, there's a lot up in the air. Ronnie Stanley's coming back. Cool. Can't wait. But can he stay healthy? On the right side, Morgan Moses, Juwan James, the rookie Falala in there. Falala or whatever. I always say his name wrong. I'm just going to admit that it's going to be a name for the eternity I get wrong. But the point nice. But the point is that we have no clue who's playing at right tackle. You would think it'd be Moses, but I don't think anything's locked up. The only hard line in the sand is it ain't going to be Tyree Phillips, but he could be playing left guard.
He will be playing left guard. I'd put money on it.
I would bet money on it too. He's the front runner, but you kind of want Ben Cleveland to get that job. So we're going to really see what happens on the offensive line. The fact that we have the players, but now we got to piece them in their spots. That's what training camp is about. That's what's exciting about training camp, because I feel like this roster is very cut and dry. This is what it is.
Mm.
So I think, to me, the biggest thing I'm going to be looking out for in the training camp and preseason, and, I guess it's just a theme I've been on this whole podcast, is who's going to be wearing the green dot. Is it going to be Chuck Clark again? Is it going to be Patrick Queen? Are they going to ask Patrick Queen to stay on the field every single down? Do they think he's ready to take that step? Or he's showing that kind of improvement? Is it going to be Williams kind of conducting things from center field?
Josh Bynes.
Hamilton.
You want to play Bynes every down, though? That's tough for me.
That's true.
That's tough for me. And so then you're like, okay, well, Hamilton, I'd love to see him play every down. I'm not sure if he will. He's a rookie. I think that's probably maybe the biggest question non-pass rush related facing the defense is who's going to wear the green dot. And this is, to me, the big thing about Clark. Clark is just so freaking smart, man. He is just so smart. Obviously he's an NFL caliber athlete. This is not meant to say he's not a good athlete, but he is not like the elite Jamal Adams kind of athletic specimen at safety, right? He is your kind of guy who is sniffing out and ending plays before they even begin. It's like Cedric Mullins playing for the Orioles. His range and his ability to read a ball off the bat is so good that he makes these hard plays look so easy because he gets to the ball before needing to dive. Chuck Clark is the same thing. He's getting to spots and blowing up plays, and he doesn't have to do it in some spectacular fashion because it's just play after play for him. And taking the green dot away, I don't know if it's taking it away versus reassigning it, but it does raise a question of, okay, is, Williams a new offense, a new defense, Hamilton, NFL, new defense, Queen, not sure about that yet. Those are the three other guys I can think of that you give it to that you can trust to be on the field 100% of the snaps. I think Williams is probably the most likely to get it, and I don't hate that, but it does make me wonder if we lose anything by taking it away from Chuck Clark.
Yeah, and it's also kind of interesting to see, are any of the safeties even going to be – I mean, they're all going to get plenty of snaps, but with the rotation that they have, and, I mean, we talked about Stevens, Clark, Williams, Hamilton, like you're going to want somebody to wear that dot that's going to be on the field every single play, and they're going to have to identify which of the safeties that's going to be because – when you got four guys rotating in on a regular basis, there's going to be regular plays where there's nobody. I mean, just obviously there's going to be less plays where there's guys in the field wearing the green dot, which is a massive disadvantage. So to your point, do they go with Queen because he's more the clear cut kind of top of his position group? Is he capable? I'm sure he is, but that's a question that has to be asked. So these are all kind of things that you have to consider when you're thinking about who's going to wear that dot, who's going to play the majority of the snaps. Is the person that they're going to put it on capable enough? These are all kind of things that got to go into your mind.
Yeah, and
I don't want to put that on Queen.
Well, and that's the thing. You're going to have to see that out of Queen, Williams, Hamilton, Clark. I mean, that's the four. And if Hamilton isn't a guy you want to play every single snap now because you want more Hamilton, or if Clark isn't a guy you want to play every snap because you want your new draft pick and your new signing in there, then which one of the new guys are you going to trust to do that? McDonald seems pretty excited about Queen. The whole team does, but I think it's going to be a process for them to figure it out. I'm excited to watch how they do it.
I would put money on Williams, and the reason why is he's kind of that deep safety, eyes of the defense thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to put it on Hamilton, not only because you have versatile safeties you want to interchange, but because he's a rookie. Patrick Queen is best when he's a read react guy and when he's confident. Giving him another task, if I was a coach, I wouldn't want to do that. So Williams almost gets it by default if the criterion is on the field. And look, he is a 5-year pro at this point who's coming into his prime. If he's a big part of your plan, I have no problem with the fact that he's new. Someone new is getting the dot. And it's a new defense for everybody. It might be very similar, but it's a new defense.
Yeah, and so I think that wrinkle of a new defense, if it was just Wink installing a new system or, Wink making adjustments, you could just, grind tape from the last few years and pick up the defense really quickly. So I think that's the big question, I think, for me heading into training camp. But heading into training camp, I think for the NFL at large, I think we're really set up for what will be an interesting season. And so I think we're each going to go with one storyline that we're interested in. Ron, I'll let you kick that off for us.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to get out of the AFC for this one, see how the other half lives. And when I was kind of looking over the NFC, the team that really sticks out to me and with the biggest range of outcomes and pretty much the most interesting is the Philadelphia Eagles. They have Jalen Hurts at quarterback. Last year, they were a playoff team, but nobody really expected them to make any noise once they got in, and they didn't make any noise when they got in. But this offseason, what do? They go out and they get A.J. Brown. They make a big trade on draft night for him. They go and make an under-the-radar kind of wide receiver signing in Zach Pascal, a guy who can really help stretch the field. You got Devontae Smith coming into year 2. They've really surrounded him with all the pieces. And if Hurts can put it together, and I know it's ironic for us to say as Ravens fans, if Hurts can put it together in the passing game, they're really going to be something. But Hurts, to me, isn't nearly the thrower that Lamar is right now. So it's a little bit more justified to throw that around in his regard. But the Eagles are very interesting. And in an NFC that feels very up for grabs, especially with the loss of Devontae Adams up north and where he's going, and how the Packers are kind of, you don't really know about him right now. Is this the year Brady falls off? I know we've been saying it for literally our entire lifetimes almost at this point. But is this the year that happens? You know, their best receiver, Chris Godwin's coming, or Mike Evans, or you can debate back and forth. But either way, one of their best receivers is coming off a torn ACL. They've got their question marks. Do the Rams kind of have their, Super Bowl hangover? So there's a lot of questions in the NFC, and the top is ripe for the picking for a team like Philly, who could be on the cusp of some really interesting things.
Yeah, I like what they did this offseason. I think it's just a question of being able to cover other teams with their secondary. That is just like their weakness for a couple years now. But I do think they have a couple dogs at receivers. Getting A.J. Brown's going to just free up Devonta Smith to do what he does better, which is kind of a bit more technician route running. And A.J. Brown, you've got kind of that speed power combo. And I think that having that strong running game to lean on early in the season is going to let that offense kind of get settled as the year goes on. I think a team that's flying crazy under the radar for me is the Colts, the Matt Ryan Colts. I don't think we're, quite understanding how good that offensive line is and has been pretty consistent. Quentin Nelson's the best offensive lineman in the game as far as I'm concerned. And they got targets. I mean, they got Pittman. I think Jelani Woods, obviously I was on the Jelani Woods for the Ravens train. He went pretty early before the Ravens had a chance to snag him anyway. And, him coming in with Matt Ryan, I just think that we are forgetting that Matt Ryan is like quite a good quarterback when he has people to pass to. And that was the thing last year, is he had no one to pass to. But this year, I think
an offensive line to block for him.
Right. And the other thing is that defense just performs. It's not necessarily the flashiest defense, but Darius Leonard is just rock solid, about as good of a linebacker you can find. And I think that defense kind of has overperformed, I feel like, the last few years, but still isn't getting their laurels. And I think that the offense is going to have to step it up to match this year. But it's a motivated Matt Ryan, and I don't think we've seen a really motivated Matt Ryan since the Falcons were making the playoffs. But I think he's like, hey, I'm in kind of a weak division. The Titans are kind of in a tenuous spot where they're not the, dominant AFC South team. And I think the Colts have a real window to say, okay, let's run it back with Matt Ryan for a year and push it. And let's see what kind of noise we can make in the AFC. Chris, what's your kind of interesting topic for the NFL so far, or heading into the season?
Well, I think you hit a good one with the Colts, but I'm going to go back to the NFC, and I'm going to say the Detroit Lions could be a surprise playoff team. Now, that might be a little rich. I could see a 6 or 7 win season, but I don't see them being the lovable losers anymore. When Dan Campbell came on the scene, he had an opening press conference where he started talking about biting off kneecaps, and I was like, look at this moron. I was convinced it was the wrong fit. But this past season showed me that he's got a little something that John Harbaugh has in this. Despite the context of the season, with everything going wrong in a culture that is not used to winning, that team fought hard. That team fought very, very hard, and it's growing up. It's a team growing up. Obviously, you don't have the quarterback play that you want in Detroit. DeAndre Swift is a weapon that I love. Jameson Williams going there. That offense has got some speed now, and I just think they're growing up. If you can fight for your life, just take that much pride in getting one win, and you can stay together as a team. I think they might have the right coach there. I actually thought they had the right coach with Jim Caldwell, and they should have never gone away from him. But you have a steadying influence, and that, to me, with a little bit of talent and a young growing up team, I think the Lions, and look at their division. So you got 2 losses to the Packers every year, but you got probably 2 wins with that defensive front the Lions have against that offensive line of the Bears. Let's put 2 wins on the record right now. Let's say you split with the Vikings, 3 wins in division right there. That's that for the Lions. That's a start. The kindling. So I see the Lions as a team that can really step up and be a sneaky wild card team. And look, the Lions are the lovable losers anymore. They're the kneecap biters, and they're here.
And who's to even say, a couple of guys that you didn't mention too. Amon-Ra St. Brown coming into his second year. He showed many flashes last year with Jared Goff. They built up some chemistry.
And the tight end.
Perhaps the most underrated tight end in football in TJ Hawkinson. They've got some pieces, man. And who's to even say that Green Bay is a guaranteed 2 wins at this point? They have their they've lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They went and obviously Devontae Adams, they went and lost him. He's out in Las Vegas now. So who's Aaron Rodgers going to throw to? They have plenty of question marks this year. It wouldn't shock me one bit if they went into Ford Field and left there with a lack of kneecaps, we'll say, this season.
I love it. I love it.
I think that's the thing you hit on it with Campbell, getting a team to fight like that, a team that has talent, a team that has one of the best offensive lines in the league. And that's obviously a foundation for success. I think the Lions have gone about this the right way and saying, look, we know it's all about the quarterback. We are going to build up talent everywhere else. And when the right opportunity to get a quarterback strikes, we're going to take it. And I just don't think they've had that opportunity yet. Because they don't want to be paying, Garoppolo his full contract or anything like that. They with Goff already to deal with, and I think they're saying, look, we want to hit a rookie hard. We're gonna have some low draft picks for at least one more year. I still think playoff might be tough. I still think they probably end up with a top 10 draft pick in all truth, but that's a top 10 draft pick for a QB right there. And I think Goff's contract becomes easier to deal with after this year, and I think. Suddenly, you roll around to 2023 and you're in business. You're really making a lot of noise. So I think those are our kind of storylines to watch for all of us for the NFL this year. So let's close it out with a little bit of a fun segment that we have here. Chris, you got some trivia for us, I understand.
All right. Here it is. Can Shiz stump you? All right. I got 3 trivia questions. All Ravens related. And I think they're kind of fun. I spent all day workshopping this, so let's see how this goes. Well, this is the theme that you can tell where my train of thought is. In 2014, the Ravens had a great pass rushing duo of Elvis Dumervil and Terrell Suggs. They obviously led the team in sacks, who was 3rd in 2014 for the Ravens in sacks.
I don't have the slightest idea.
Suggs, right? Was that?
That's tough because you can't think of an.
Upshaw would have left the year before, correct? I think Upshaw left after the Super Bowl.
It's not Upshaw.
Well, and it's tough because you'd think it would be an edge, but those guys dominated the edge snaps, and so Brandon Williams is not picking up sacks like that.
Was it Brent Urban?
No, but I like the guess.
Oh, no, he was a year after. I think he got drafted.
Was it like an inside linebacker that we're missing?
It was a edge player, but he's more of a edge defensive lineman combination.
2014.
This wasn't the Zadarius Smith, right? This is pre-Zadarius.
No.
Man, is this your stumper?
No, McPhee was gone by then too.
You promised?
No.
Is this the stumper that you?
No, it was Pernell McPhee.
Oh, it's there.
McPhee. I was just last.
Let's
go.
Right before we got
All right. So I didn't want to
Chicago.
give the answer, but I didn't want to rule out the answer. And then it was McPhee. Yeah. I was surprised at that too. So I saw.
Suck it,
I looked that up and I was like, all right, because I've been thinking about pass rushers. Now this one, I'm going to guarantee this one stumps you. I'm putting it to the wall here. This Ravens player, you got to guess the player. This Ravens player has more all-purpose yards than the player that leads the Ravens all-time in receiving. This player has more all-purpose yards than the player that leads the Ravens in rushing. He holds 4 Ravens franchise records and at one point led the team in all-purpose yards with 8,001 yards. Who is this player?
Okay, hold on.
All-purpose yards. Everything.
Was it all with the Ravens?
Yes. This is with the Ravens. He played for 2 other teams, but this is including only his Ravens career.
It's not Jacoby.
No, it's not Jacoby Jones.
Michael Jackson? I don't know.
That is a very good guess. You're in the right ballpark.
Is it Quadri Ismail?
No, it is not Quadri Ismail.
Who returned kicks?
Oh, Travis Taylor.
No, you're gonna shoot yourselves when you hear this.
Who was our like?
No, but you're dancing around it.
Who was our like great kick returner? Oh my god.
This is my favorite one because I thought of this. We're
right that it's a receiver who returned kicks, right? Like we're spot on about that.
Yeah, you're totally on the right train of thought. There's people listening to this going, "Oh, come on, guys!" They're screaming it out. At this point, we've narrowed it down for them.
Like Yamon Figures keeps popping in my mind. I know it's not that.
It's not Yamon Figures. Get out of here with that. He had one touchdown catch. Bye.
Most all-purpose yards, and it's not any of those guys that I just mentioned. I know.
And remember, he doesn't have the most all-purpose yards. He at one point had the most all-purpose.
It's not BJ Sams.
No, it's not BJ Sams. You guys are killing me at this point. I thought this was going to get you. You give up? Ron, you give up?
I really don't want to, but for the sake of not sitting here all night, I will.
Jermaine Lewis. People forget that he was a good receiver. People forget he was a decent receiver for us. He holds the Ravens
Chris, I think I named every member of that receiving core except for him.
It killed me. I was like, he's gonna get it. He's gonna get it. All right, he kills me. So he has 4 Ravens franchise records, including punt returns, most punt returns, most kick return yards, most punt return yards. So I mean, this guy, dude, Ravens legend, Super Bowl kickoff return for a touchdown.
Damn it, I'm so mad.
Yeah, my favorite thing about Jermaine Lewis is the New York Giants got back into that game with a kickoff return touchdown, and Jermaine Lewis is like, anything you can do, I can do better.
That was the play that popped right when you said his name. The Super Bowl popped into my head, and I was like, you got to be kidding me.
For extra points, do you know the name of the Giants kick returner?
The Giants kick returner? No. Seahorn.
I believe I could be wrong on this. I'm not gonna go too crazy on it, but I believe it was Ron Dixon.
Ah, okay.
All right, and the final trivia question. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, I'm so pumped up about this one. This one is fun. Todd Heap leads the Ravens in receiving touchdowns for the franchise record. How many touchdowns does one Mark Andrews, one best tight end in the NFL, Mark Andrews, have to get this season to pass Todd Heap? Just take a guess.
I'm going to say 15.
That's close.
I'm going to say 17.
Mark Andrews needs 13 touchdowns.
13.
It's right on the edge of possible, but very unlikely.
By the way, that is crazy to think like how like the high esteem that we hold Todd Heap around here, and Mark Andrews is probably going to break that record already.
12
this year.
Touchdowns gets him 41 exactly. That's where Todd Heap sits. 13 tops him.
He hasn't even hit his prime yet. Like that's
you got to remember Todd Heap was hurt a lot.
That's true. Tight ends being hurt is kind of like the story.
And he had no quarterbacks
before Mark Andrews.
Ron, you made me think of an interesting question to close us out. How many current Ravens right now are on the all-time starting offense, defense, special teams for like the team is in general? I was going through my head. Yeah, how many players on the team right now would be a starter on an all-time Ravens team? Lamar is a clearly the best quarterback this team's ever touched. Like
Tucker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tucker.
Andrews.
Yeah.
Can't give it to Stanley because of Ogden.
No.
Would you throw Humphrey in there yet, or do you still like McAllister and like there's been some guys like over the years?
But McAllister was more consistent for 8 years.
The thing is, I don't know if there's a guy I'd rather have than Humphrey other than McAllister. You know, there are a lot of good guys, but I still think like Dwayne Starks at his time versus Marlon Humphrey at his prime. I'm sure we could debate this a lot more, but I think Humphrey might edge that one out. I think that might be – I'm not counting guys like Campbell and Houston because they're not like, all haven't been on the team as long. I think that might be it. Andrews, Jackson, Tucker, and maybe you throw in like a
because you can't throw Stanley in there, obviously.
Can you
It
get a
sucks-
half
it sucks
point
that
for
he
Cook
plays
being
for
the coach?
Huh?
Can you get a half point for Cook being the coach?
Yeah,
Yeah.
being the coach. Well, and then the other thing is like, you look at like, do you feel like Kyle Hamilton should end up there eventually? But at the same time, it's like, I guess that would make him the second best safety in team history. And he would be on that starter. But anyway, it's just an interesting question to ponder since you brought it up. But guys, this was such a fun podcast. I'm really excited for our second season and really for this whole season. Chris, especially to have you in the fold.
I can't wait to be back, guys. Love to thank you for having me. Team Russell Street. Let's go Ravens.
Yes. Actually, let me just close on a quick story, too, because the way that Chris and I met was for our old site, Ebony Bird, before I had ever written an article for anybody, when I was just doing this on Reddit for fun to try to get better at it. The first person who ever really kind of helped me along, and he was the site editor for Ebony Bird, was Chris. So I guess I don't know if you have him to thank or him to lambast for me being here today. But regardless, I would not be here today if not for you, Chris. So
it is all
thanks.
Your fault,
it's an honor. It's an honor to see you kicking butt. You would have gotten your start one way or the other because you're quite the man. But that's really nice. Thanks.
All right. Well, as always, great chopping it up with you guys here on a Monday night. And as always, thanks you to everyone who tuned in, and we'll watch this on YouTube later. Thanks so much.